Hi, Sue.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I adored Pachinko. I had read the novel before, obsessed with it, loved your interpretation. Now,
Thank
I think
you.
even for those who had not read the novel and were not aware of its importance, I think that the moment that we heard that Minho had to audition for the role, you know, it was a big deal. So, what was it about his performance or his interpretation of Kohansu that really spoke to you or connected with you?
There's so many things. I mean, Hanzu is probably one of the trickiest characters in the show, right? Because it's easy to play him all veneer. You can just stand there, look great. But really, we wanted to probe deeper into that character of how did someone like that become that way? And knowing that we also had the seventh episode, our departure episode, and how much that was going to anchor on Hanzu, I really wanted to find someone who can portray both that awesome veneer that he has, but when you dig deeper, you get that vulnerability. And Minho, in just all of our auditions and conversations, like he wanted to do it. He wanted to probe himself. He wanted to stretch himself as an actor. And that desire revealed his vulnerability, right? And so there was no question that he was our Hansu.
Wonderful. Now, speaking of your departure episode, which was both, you know, heartbreaking and very unexpected to see, on the reverse side, as a book reader, there is a character whose name I will not say, whose absence throughout the story is rather loud, I guess you could say. Was that a conscious choice to make the absence part of the story rather than just showcasing that arc? Or is that more like, if we do a season two, we'll put that in there?
Well, I think there's been some confusion. The show is 4 seasons long.
Okay,
and so it was never supposed to be a limited series. So the idea is we're going to watch these characters grow up as well. So that storyline is coming. You know, I think there's no way you can tell this story just in 8 episodes. It's impossible. And to do it full justice and to fall in love with the characters and really understand what they live through, it has to be the whole spectrum.
Definitely. I'm so glad to hear that. I was like, wait a second. Now, Minha gives such a powerful performance as Sanja that I would never have expected her to be such a relative newcomer to the screen, to on-screen acting. What was it like working with her to really anchor Sanja in both those ages, at 16 and at 22?
Effortless. That's stuff you can't learn, right? You can't go to acting school and get that. She naturally can tap into these feelings and emotions. And what I find so much, being behind the monitor and watching Minha, I always say you see the character in their eyes. It's not their voice. It's not even their body. It's in their eyes. Like, what is in their eyes? And in her eyes, you just see a depth of feeling, right? And that's natural.
That's beautiful. On the other hand, you have Yuh-jung, who is just a living legend, is so prolific, has done so much work. What is it like to kind of, whether it's reverse engineering all the Sanjas out of her performance or having her be the culmination of all the Sanjas who have come before?
I mean, really, YJ, again, is so intuitive. You know, so much of this story, she's lived through, her family's lived through, right? It's in her bones. And when she says, I know this character inside and out, why would you ever doubt that she's YJ, right? And she is someone, every time the camera says action, she'll do something different in each take, right? And you're like, oh, that was great. Thinking she'll do it again. And the next take, she'll do something just slightly, and then you're like, that was great. So she's one of these actors who, when you get to the edit room, it's almost impossible to edit her because they're all terrific takes.
Now, when it comes to things like historical events, such as the Great Kanto earthquake or the other historical settings you have throughout, how do you approach creating that authenticity and merging it with the story?
I mean, so much of it comes with just as much research as possible. We worked with so many historians in the show and reading as many first-person accounts. At the end of the day, like, we weren't there, right? How do you recreate something that is so just horrific? And as much as we try to do the research, at the end of the day, subjectivity has to be the guiding light for us. And that's universal, right? Like if you were in an earthquake and we looked at the 9/11 in New York City, the footage of that, and just in that blink of a second when your life changes, how do people react and how do people respond? I think it's a complicated way of saying you try to dig as deep as you can, knowing that we weren't there, and there's going to be some interpretation to it.
Now, finally, both Kogonada and Justin Chan have such a beautiful way of telling this story. And I was wondering how early on in the process did they come on board with you and what made them write for Pachinko?
I'm trying to remember. I mean, prep started a few months before shooting, and they were both in it from prep. And, you know, when we were talking to directors, what made Kay and Justin stand out was they're different from one another, right? And that was really exciting. But also, I always say this, this is a show when I talk to people, you feel it in your bones. And people can respect the show, people can admire the show, even, you know, but you have to feel it. And Kay and Justin felt it. And that's something that comes out in all your conversations. So as soon as I realized these two people know this show, they feel the show, I knew they were the right people.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I loved this section and I cannot wait for the rest of it.